Agent Ronald expected to travel a lot in his first month on the job, but he didn't expect to be thrown into the middle of nowhere out of Russia. These were by no means the places Ronald intended to visit. Together with some other soldiers, he had been sent there to verify the rumors about some kind of enchanted forest where a witch supposedly lived. Although Ronald worked for the SCP Foundation, he was still skeptical about most of the tasks. After all, just in the first weeks of work, all the combat trips turned out to be mostly false. This enchanted forest was located next to a small abandoned city. After inspecting the first 3 houses, Ronald vomited. In each building, they found several gnawed bodies, and the limbs of all the victims were gone. Ronald was put off by what he saw, but he still continued to believe in rational explanations. Ronald suggested that local wild animals, perhaps wolves or bears, were to blame for the deaths of these people. Nevertheless, orders are orders, so the soldiers pushed on deep into the forest where the bloody footprints led. Ronald went last in the column. A few kilometers later, the guy overheard his colleagues talking about some kind of giant web. Ronald asked some questions to get clarification, but there was no answer. Those walking in front simply began to laugh, and incoherent and unintelligible remarks could be heard from their lips. Ronald was a smart guy and immediately realized that it was best not to touch the web. He cleared his way by raking it with the muzzle of his machine gun. The further Ronald advanced, the thicker the web became, whilst the voices of his colleagues subsided. The soldier called everyone by name, yet no one answered. Only a distant crunch was heard, either branches or bones. Ronald went out into an open meadow and found the strange picture in front of him. One of his comrades was walking in a circle with a happy gleam in his eyes, smiling as he muttered something under his breath. He gave no reaction to Ronald's words. When the soldier took a step forward, his comrade was knocked down by something strong and fast. Ronald had never encountered a single animal in his life capable of such a thing. But then the guy saw that it was not a wild animal at all. An old and wrinkled woman with a very untidy appearance began to gnaw off the limbs of the drugged soldier, who continued to smile as if nothing had happened. Ronald fired the entire magazine of his machine gun into the bloodthirsty old woman's head. She fell to the ground with no signs of life. The operative contacted headquarters and said that the object had been eliminated. At that moment, he felt something wet on his neck. Ronald went to turn around, but then his mind was filled with a sort of inexplicable bliss. The guy felt so good, he didn't even notice how the witch's teeth clung to his shoulder. Only half of a femur remained of Ronald. The scary witch was later contained by the Foundation under the number SCP-352. Given her Russian origin, many employees call the object Baba Yaga. This anomaly is an emaciated old woman whose age and even race cannot be fully determined. Asking about this directly is even more difficult. The object is incredibly aggressive towards people, and her speech, consisting of nothing but threats and promises of revenge, is difficult to make out. The old woman speaks in an unknown dialect from Old Russian with an accent that's rather difficult to understand. The overall strength, stamina, and speed of the woman would be envied by even the most physically developed Foundation operative. She easily lifts objects weighing over 440 pounds or 200 kilograms, and runs at a speed of over 43 miles or 70 kilometers per hour. The bullets with which Ronald hoped to neutralize the creature cannot stop the old woman. She survived beheading, dismemberment, disembowelment, and many other procedures that would prove deadly for the average person. And every time the witch came back to life, regardless of the degree of damage. Granted, the more her body suffered, the longer it took to regenerate. Her insides looked the same as those of an ordinary old woman. Only, tissue analysis did not confirm her belonging to the human species exactly. One of the object's anomalous abilities is growing hair on its body. The witch usually controls this process. Glass-like hairs grow at a speed of several meters per hour. They're almost invisible due to their transparency and thin nature. There were quite a lot of these where the object was found, so Ronald was able to notice and bypass them. The web secretes a special enzyme, which is found in its largest quantities within the saliva of the old woman. Upon contact with the human body, the enzyme almost immediately affects the victim's nervous system. A person bewitched by this narcotic substance feels no pain, sees hallucinations, and ends up in a euphoric state. Thinking and other cognitive functions are completely disabled. If a person received a weak dose but was not eaten, then after a few days, the effect disappears. With a stronger impact, a person can remain forever in this blissful yet vegetative state. 99.9% of all witch bites lead to just the right effect. I think by now you've already guessed that the anomaly's favorite treat is human flesh. Despite her obvious physical advantage, the witch does not like to deal with fluttering and resisting victims. Age gets to a person after all. Instead, the anomaly prefers to weave thick webs from its hair. The subject then waits for the victim to be exposed to the enzyme, at which point they become more submissive. Baba Yaga is quite thrifty and likes to stretch one meal over several days. And so that the food does not run away or crawl away, the witch bites off their hands and feet. Left without limbs, people continue to be in a state of blissful delight until they die. The anomalous beings forced even the Foundation's staff to descend into wild cave practices, since they regularly bring children to the witch. Yes, imagine that. She's fed exclusively selected children under the age of 2. It's okay to let D-class employees be fed to her. After all, they're all criminals which, in general, are also immoral. But what terrible offense could babies possibly have committed that they deserved such a terrible fate? The fact is, this is the only way out. If the witch is not given what she wants, she'll run away and then a much larger number of people will suffer. Still, if the witch attacks any employees, she's punished with a month-long hunger strike. Foundation management considered the use of 2 anomalies that would help save on babies. That is, save their lives, of course. This primarily concerns SCP-352. This object is a table set of 19 plates and 21 glasses. Food and drink placed in an anomalous dish will automatically turn into human flesh and blood. Although not just blood. The glasses can contain any liquid of human origin. Another possible option is SCP-1680. This is a group of genetically identical 8-year-old boys, each of them being a clone of Tyler Buchanan, who went missing back in February of 2007. Every child considers himself the original, and herein lies the problem. It's okay to feed the witch with clones, but it's not known what will happen if the object suddenly tastes the real boy. Perhaps SCP-1680 will then cease to exist altogether. Furthermore, the witch will most likely get tired of eating the same boy, who, among other things, is not included in the old woman's favorite age category. Personally, I think SCP-604 is a better source of feeding. It's odd that it's not been used thus far, at least experimentally. But I have my own explanation for this. I think the person in charge of feeding SCP-352 is simply an extremely cynical and hateful sort of villain. Let's just refer to them as M for the sake of convenience. Growing up, M was an ordinary child. He was never bullied, but no one really wanted to be friends with him either. He wasn't beaten up by the school bullies, but he wasn't invited to any cool parties either. And as a teenager, all the girls rejected M. Then he grew up, got a job at the SCP Foundation and tasted power. M decided to take revenge on everyone who had ever offended him. He dug up the addresses and biographies of all the girls who rejected him, as well as the guys who did not want to be friends with him. He longed for revenge and wanted to see those people suffer. Motivated by the need to feed the witch with young children, he kidnapped the newly born sons and daughters of his school antagonists. Foundation management did not want to resort to such measures, but M was able to convince them that this was the only way to do things. And so, who here's the greater evil in this case? A witch who by her nature eats people, or an ordinary person who gives no second thought to getting revenge by any means available? But let's not rush to conclusions, as I have another variation of the story in mind. Not all employees report contact with the object's hair. Despite contact with the old woman being prohibited, some staff may accidentally stumble upon her thin hair near the containment chamber. It's possible that microdoses of SCP-352's enzyme cause unusual effects. They penetrate the brain and force the victim to provide the witch with a child under the age of 2. After all, how else could one explain such atrocities on the part of the Foundation's employees? One of the key points in the biography of SCP objects regarding this issue I ignored, namely, the origin. I did this because I consider Baba Yaga from Russia to be only part of a wider group of anomalies around the world. Surely there are in every country legends about such witches who perhaps are not legends at all. Share with us in the comments who you think might be related to SCP-352.